Welcome back to another groups video. This is actually our last one for this semester, and so I'm kind of sad, bittersweet, but it's okay. We've had a good time, and we'll be back in the fall, and we hope that you hang out with your group over the summer, and don't just take this break and never see each other, but we're just officially taking a break for the summer. But anyways, if you're wondering why I got these weird things on, I got tendonitis in my thumbs, so it's kind of a pain. So if you'd be praying for me, that'd be cool. Another thing is I had another stain on my shirt, but I'm not sure if it's there anymore, but Vince spit up on me this morning, so it's there. So it might just be a staple of these videos moving forward, especially having a kid now, so we're just gonna have to get used to it, so it's fine. Anyways, we started, or actually we finished this sermon series that we've been doing on a generous life. And so this last week we kind of had story time. It was fun. We kind of played with that phrase, but there was a few stories, and so the questions that we're going to talk about today are based on those stories. So the first story is really one of my favorites, is when Jesus was teaching, and then the disciples, not yet disciples, some of the future disciples like Peter and others were out on this boat, and Jesus looks at them and says, "Wait, why don't you go back out?" They spent all night fishing and caught nothing. They come back in. He says, "Hey, why don't you go back out into the deep water again and throw the nets on the other side?" And they're like, "Dude, are you crazy? We've already been doing this. We haven't caught anything all night." And if you haven't watched the series The Chosen, they have a really great depiction of this. But anyway, so this whole thing starts to happen, and then Jesus says, "Why don't you just cast on the other side?" They said, "Okay, we'll do it." They cast on the other side, and they have so much fish that it overflows the boat. They can't even barely hold it. And so it started to get me to think about some different things. But the question I have for right now, which I think can relate to this, because there's been times in our lives where we try something, and it doesn't seem to work. And then I think it's hard for us when God calls us to that thing again, because we almost don't want to do it because it's like, oh, it didn't work last time. A good example is back in the day, we used to try the trunk or treat thing on like to celebrate Halloween and stuff like that, and it just never really worked. This last year it came back up, and a lot of us were like, oh man, I don't know if we should do it. It's never worked. But we really felt, especially Pastor Melissa felt that God was calling us to it. We did it, and it was successful. So this is a long intro. The question I have is, what dream or call have you given up on that you think God might be calling you to again? And so a dream that you've had that you felt like God gave you, or a call on your life that you felt God gave you, but you've been trying, kind of like the disciples, or kind of like Peter, trying to fish over and over and over again, not getting anything all night long, and then Jesus comes along and says, do it again. How many of us feel like there might be something that we've given up on that God might be calling us onto again? And this is kind of a tough question, and some of you may not be able to answer saying that you have that, but I think for the one or two or three in the room that might be feeling this could be kind of a breath of fresh air and a weight off your shoulders, that I think even if it didn't work in the past, if you feel like God's calling you to it, maybe he actually is. So let's talk about that real quick. The first question: do you have a dream or call that you've given up on that you think God is calling you back into? Ready, set, go. All right, we're back. That was great. I'm dreaming big, and I'm thinking back to what God is calling me to, and I feel like I'm in the boat and I'm ready to throw it on the other side. So that was corny, but I don't care. So anyways, here's the second question. It's the next story. It's really a great story. Jesus feeds the 5,000. A lot of us have heard this story before. The disciples are trying to be nice, but also trying to get their own meal, because they say like, hey, there's all these people. It's probably about 25 or 20,000 people. And the disciples say, hey, we should send them home so that they can eat. It's getting dark. And Jesus says, why don't we feed them? And I'm thinking, the disciples are thinking through their head, like, why would we feed them? We don't have any food. We don't have any money. They even say that it would take a year's wages to feed all these people, more than a year's wages to feed all these people. And so they're thinking to themselves, we're going to not have any food to feed these people, and we're not going to have any food for ourselves to eat. But anyway, so Jesus says, what do we have? And so then they speak up, they say, we have 5 loaves and 2 fish. And And so they take that and they distribute it out, and it keeps multiplying. And at the very end, a really cool kind of thing that sometimes we cue into, sometimes we don't, is that there's 12 basketfuls left over, and there's also 12 disciples. So here's the question. What does that mean? Why were there 12 basketfuls left over at the end, and what does that mean for the disciples? Ready, set, go. Okay, we're back. Hopefully at some point in that conversation, I wasn't paying attention, I had to use the restroom, but hopefully at some point in that conversation, you got to the idea that we as leaders, as Christians, or whatever we're doing in our life, if we give what we have, oftentimes God gives us actually what we need. And so sometimes we hold on to the 5 loaves and 2 fish, which wouldn't have been very much for 12 disciples, but we hold on to that thinking we really need it, instead of letting it go, and then all of a sudden we have 12 basketfuls left over, a basket for each and every one of us. So give what we have so that we can receive what we don't have. It's the whole message of Sunday. So the next story that we have is this famous story of David and Goliath, and you probably have all heard of it. And I, as a little kid, would dress up like David, and I put this oversized armor on and sword, and I throw it off, and I get my slingshot, you know, and I didn't kill any giants. I tried, but I could never find any. So the question I have, and this is a wonderful story of kind of the whole army of Israel being scared of Goliath, and this little shepherd boy comes up and says that he's not scared and that he'll fight him, and God is with him during this fight, and he wins the fight, and then becomes king later. So the question I have, and it seems kind of simple, but I think we could dive into it. It could get pretty good. Why do you think God was with David when fighting Goliath? I don't think David could have won without God. And David even says that he comes with the Lord Lord of hosts, is what he says. And so why was God with David in the fight against Goliath? And you're like, oh, that's simple. But dive into it. It could get really good. Ready, set, go. Okay, so hopefully what you ended up getting to, which was kind of why I asked this question, is that the reason that God was with David in the fight against Goliath is because Goliath wasn't just David's enemy. Goliath wasn't just Israel's enemy. Goliath in this story was also God's enemy. So it's not about, and sometimes we get this mixed up, it's not about God meeting us in our battles, even though sometimes he does. But it's not about that. It's not about it. What that does is it paints this picture like I'm walking rogue and God will meet me whenever I come across something difficult. But that's not really how life should be. Life is that we go to Jesus, we go on his journey, and we help fight his enemies, just like David did. David wasn't finding his own enemy, picking a fight with Goliath. What he did is he walked in to the will of God and said, God does not want Goliath to overtake Israel, so I'm gonna fight this battle, and God was with him. So, there we go. Boom. Hey, yo. Hopefully you got to that and you're like, Brett, we know. Anyways, I got a couple more stories, and then the last question here for this semester until the fall. So here it is. 2 stories. There's the first one of Peter and John, and they go and they see this man who is lame, not meaning that he's a loser. It just means that he can't walk. And so that's for the younger crowd. But I always have to do that when I'm preaching in youth, but it's okay. So here's the story. So he's asking for silver or gold. You know, he's begging for money. And so Peter and John say this famous line, "Silver and gold I do not have, but what I have I give to you. Stand up and walk." And so there's another story. So that's a great story. They don't have silver or gold, but what they do, they give to him the gift of healing, and so the gift of the Holy Spirit. And so there's another story of Rahab. Rahab was a prostitute who helped Joshua and before the battle of Jericho, and she hid them, and then later on she's saved during the whole thing, and then later on marries an Israelite and becomes Joseph, the biological father of Jesus, even though, I mean, he's not really the earthly father, you know what I mean? Stepdad, Joseph, ayo, what's up, what's good? But Joseph is a direct descendant of Rahab. So this is kind of this cool thing. So Rahab couldn't offer a whole lot to these guys except for shelter and protection. And she helped them and let them sneak out her window so that they wouldn't get killed by Jericho's army. So each of these stories they didn't have necessarily what the people were looking for, but they gave what they had. So here's my question to all of us to finish off this series on generosity. What do you have that you could give to God? What do you have that you could give to somebody else? What do you have where you could say, silver and gold I do not have, but what I have I give to you? And maybe you have silver and gold, that'd be cool, you can give that. But the question basically is to wrap this all up is, how can we be generous? What do you have right now that you feel that you can give to God, or you can give to the church, or you can give to your neighbor? And let's talk about that for a few minutes. Hey, we love you. We thank you for joining us this semester. Like I said, please hang out with your groups through the summer, have some fun. Go see a movie or something, and then we'll start back up in the fall. Goodbye, so long, auf Wiedersehen, farewell. Oh, right before you leave, also, men, we'll see you on Saturday, 8:30 a.m. for Father's Day men's breakfast. Let's go. All right, bye.